Welcome to the debate. Um, Imagine being dropped into the center of a foreign city. You have a choice of two tools to survive. The first is a highly detailed, perfectly scaled map showing every street, one-way system, and intersection.
Okay.
The second is a comfortable pair of walking shoes and, well, the ability to just ask people for directions.
Right. And that map gives you this incredible illusion of control. You can see the whole structure from above. But the shoes and the questions, that is what actually gets you moving through the crowd.
Yeah, but without the map, you are wandering blindly. You're entirely dependent on the patience of strangers to get anywhere meaningful.
That's a fair point.
So today we are looking at the fundamental mechanics of adult language acquisition. Specifically, we're drawing from our source material on mastering English for daily routines. And the central question we are exploring today is this. When focusing on the needs of beginner English learners, what is the true driver of daily fluency?
Right. The real core issue.
Exactly. Is it the structured memorization of explicit grammar rules, or is it the practice of natural conversation and clarification strategies? I will be arguing that explicit grammar instruction, specifically mastering verb conjugations, tense rules, and categorizations, is the essential, non-negotiable foundation for fluency.
And I will be taking the opposing position. I argue that practicing natural conversational flow and mastering practical clarification phrases are what actually enable beginners to communicate fluently in the real world.
To set the baseline here, my stance is deeply rooted in the cognitive realities of the adult brain. Fluency simply cannot exist without structural scaffolding.
Oh, I don't know about cannot exist.
Well, adult learners do not acquire language the way toddlers do, through pure ambient immersion. They lack that specific neuroplasticity, right? When we look at the source material, we see a highly structured approach to teaching the present simple for daily routines. It doesn't just, throw verbs at the learner and hope they stick. It builds a system. It explicitly points out the mechanical differences. For instance, the morphological rule of adding an S so that I wake up becomes he wakes up.
Right, but
And that is not just a pedantic detail. It is the architecture of meaning. Furthermore, the material makes a hard distinction between regular verbs like wash becoming washed and irregular verbs like have becoming had or leave becoming left.
yeah, the classic irregular verb charts.
Exactly. To formulate a coherent thought about your day, you have to know which category your action falls into. Without explicitly memorizing these tables and rules, an adult beginner has no framework. They're just guessing at sounds, and structure must precede success.
Well, I come at it from a different way. I argue that resilience in dialogue, not structural perfection, is what creates actual fluency.
Resilience?
Yes, resilience. The cognitive reality you are talking about often ignores the psychological reality of learning a language, specifically what linguists call the affective filter. If you demand that a beginner explicitly calculate whether a verb is regular or irregular before they speak,
They learn to do it faster over time.
but initially, their anxiety spikes, their affective filter goes up, and they freeze. They literally cannot speak. If you look closely at the source material, the most powerful tools it hands to a beginner are not conjugation tables. They are phrases of conversational repair.
Which are secondary to grammar.
I disagree. It explicitly teaches beginners how to navigate moments of failure. Teaching a phrase like, sorry, I mean 8 p.m., not 7 p.m., or let me think, equips a learner to survive the messy, unpredictable reality of human interaction.
Sure, it's a backup plan.
It's the primary survival skill. The ability to navigate a misunderstanding in real time is infinitely more valuable for a beginner's daily life than perfectly memorizing a chart. Fluency is the ability to keep the conversation going, not the ability to produce a grammatically flawless sentence in a vacuum.
But let's look at what actually comprises that daily conversation. The source material focuses heavily on habitual language. It defines a routine explicitly, dealing with things you do often in the same way.
Right, routines.
And to express these concepts, the text introduces adverbs of frequency, always, usually, sometimes, and never. It provides concrete structural scaffolding. For example, I always drink water. I usually make my bed. I sometimes forget my keys.
Basic building blocks, yeah.
My argument here is that to talk about a routine, an adult beginner must explicitly learn these grammatical tools as a distinct, organized category. You cannot intuitively absorb the precise statistical difference in frequency between usually and sometimes without explicit top-down instruction. The adult brain needs to categorize that data to reduce cognitive load.
I agree that the brain needs to reduce cognitive load, but memorizing a list of frequency adverbs in isolation does not achieve that.
It gives them the categories.
The text gives us these words, yes, but their pedagogical value is entirely dependent on real-time application and context. A beginner learns usually not by studying its definition, but by repeatedly trying to explain their morning to a partner needing a word that means most days, but not today.
Okay, I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. Relying purely on conversation to acquire those structural rules is like trying to learn the physics of a bicycle by just jumping on and pedaling as hard as you can.
That's how kids learn to ride bikes, though.
But we aren't talking about kids. Sure, as an adult, you might move forward a few feet, but the moment you hit an incline, you fall over because you don't understand how the gears work. Grammar is the physics of the language.
The physics.
Yes, you need the explicit instruction to know how the gears operate. When the text teaches the structural difference between I drink tea and he drinks coffee, it is providing that foundational physics.
I want to push back on your premise here.
Go ahead.
How can a beginner possibly express the concept of a recurring, third-person routine without first having memorized the explicit rules of the present simple?
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered that understanding the physics of a bicycle is completely useless if you haven't developed the muscle memory to balance on the seat?
Well, you need both.
You can have a PhD in gyroscopic forces, but if you can't ride the bike, you can't ride the bike. Let's look at the actual role play provided in the source material. One speaker asks, "What time do you wake up?" The other answers, "I wake up at 7:00.
Which is a grammatically structured sentence.
But then, what do you do first? The response is, "I drink water and wash my face." Fluency in that exchange is demonstrated through the natural rhythm of the back and forth, what we call interactional competence.
Meaning?
The speaker is not pausing to calculate the present simple or run through a mental flowchart of verb tenses. They are engaging in a rhythmic, transactional exchange of information through lexical chunking.
Lexical chunking being the memorization of whole phrases rather than individual words.
Exactly. The phrase, wash my face, is acquired as a single functional chunk. They don't process it as pronoun plus verb, plus possessive adjective plus noun.
Right. They just grab the whole block.
They just know the chunk serves a specific communicative purpose in the moment. The rhythm of the interaction carries the meaning, not the underlying calculation of grammatical physics.
I see.
And if you're listening to this and thinking about your own language learning journey, you might be wondering why you can ace a written grammar test, but freeze when ordering a coffee. It is precisely because explicit knowledge does not automatically convert into spontaneous, real-time muscle memory.
Look, I don't disagree that lexical chunks play a role in early fluency, but that rhythm you're praising is a house of cards.
A house of cards.
Yes, it is only possible because the structural rules are functioning flawlessly in the background. The moment a learner wants to express an original thought that falls outside of their memorized chunks, say transitioning from I wash my face to yesterday I didn't wash my face because the water was shut off.
That's a huge leap in complexity, though.
But it's real life. And that rhythm collapses entirely without a grammatical framework. And this brings us precisely to the danger of the just start pedaling approach. The source material offers a very explicit warning about operating without structural certainty. It states, guessing can create mistakes.
Well, of course, guessing creates mistakes. That is the nature of learning.
But in adult language acquisition, uncorrected guessing leads directly to fossilization.
Fossilization.
A partner understands them and doesn't correct them because, as you said, the goal is just keeping the conversation going. That incorrect rule fossilizes in the learner's brain. It becomes a permanent habit that is incredibly difficult to unlearn.
But that assumes
conversation doesn't naturally correct itself?
By teaching explicit grammar up front, for instance, memorizing that prepare is regular while get is irregular, you prevent these conversational breakdowns and grammatical fossilizations entirely. Clear rules eliminate the need for guessing. If you know the rule, you do not make the mistake.
I think you are misinterpreting the source's solution to that very problem. Yes, the text explicitly warns that guessing can create mistakes.
It's right there in black and white.
But the antidote the text provides is not, go back to your workbook and memorize your irregular verb charts so you never dare to make a mistake again. The antidote it provides is entirely interactional.
How so?
It teaches specific conversational tools to replace silent guessing with active clarification. It teaches learners to ask, do you mean 800 or 830? It teaches them to say, what does that mean and can you explain that again? These aren't just filler phrases, they are active negotiation strategies.
But relying on those clarification phrases constantly is an admission of structural failure.
Absolutely not.
It is. It means the primary communication is broken down because the grammatical foundation was weak to begin with. If the learner just knew the vocabulary and the tense, they wouldn't have to stall the conversation to ask for help.
It is absolutely not an admission of failure. It is a mature recognition of reality. Human communication is inherently flawed and noisy.
Even for native speakers.
Exactly. Even native speakers mishear each other, forget words, and need clarification on a daily basis. The text explicitly frames this as a normal, expected part of the communicative process.
Okay.
In one of the dialogues, a speaker says, "Sometimes I forget one word in English," and the partner's response is, "That is okay." It actively normalizes the breakdown. The text provides a mechanism for psychological resilience.
But they still forgot the word.
Right, but if you forget a word, you say, "Let me check my notes." Or if you mishear, you just ask, "Again," which the text notes is a simple word and the best choice. This proves that interactive resilience trumps grammatical perfection.
I wouldn't go that far.
A beginner who knows how to ask for help and keep the interaction alive is far more fluent in a practical sense than a beginner who stays completely silent because they are paralyzed by the fear of whether leave becomes leaved or left.
There is a difference between occasional native-level mishearings and fundamental communicative failure. I am going to point directly to how the source material handles pronunciation, because this exposes the limits of your interactive resilience theory perfectly.
Okay, let's look at pronunciation.
English orthography, our spelling system, is famously, perhaps notoriously, non-phonetic. You cannot deduce how an English word sounds just by looking at its letters. The source material knows this, which is why it completely stops the conversational flow to teach explicit, top-down phonetic rules.
It provides a pronunciation guide, yes, but that's just a starting point.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it goes far beyond a simple guide. It dictates the reality of the language. It explicitly corrects the pronunciation of breakfast, noting it is break fast with a reduced second syllable, not break fast.
Sure.
It dictates the stress in routine is routine and alarm is alarm. It even addresses regional variations, noting that schedule can be pronounced schedule or schedule, validating that both are okay.
Which shows flexibility.
But if we follow your premise that conversational flow is the primary driver, a Spanish-speaking adult learner reading the word breakfast will logically map their native phonetic assumptions onto the text and pronounce it break fast. No amount of natural conversational rhythm is going to naturally correct that orthographic interference.
Context does?
No, the explicit intervention of the phonetic rule is the only thing that aligns their speech with understandable English. You cannot clarify your way out of fundamentally mispronouncing the core vocabulary of your own daily routine.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Even in the realm of pronunciation, where L1 interference is definitely a real hurdle, context and conversational repair absolutely save the day.
Save the day. Really?
Yes, you are hyper-focusing on the isolated pronunciation drills in the text, but look at how the text applies meaning in the actual role plays. Look at the misunderstanding exercise they deliberately demonstrate.
The tea and coffee one?
Right. One speaker says, "I have tea for breakfast." The other replies, "Oh, I thought you said coffee," and the first speaker corrects, "No, tea."
But hold on, that is a vocabulary mix-up. One person heard coffee, one said tea. That is not a phonetics issue where the word itself was rendered incomprehensible.
But the mechanism of repair is exactly the same. The cognitive skill required to fix the error is identical. Or take the example where the speaker says, "I leave home at 7:15. The partner asks, "Sorry, do you mean 7:15 in the morning?"
Because they lacked context.
Right, but they didn't stop the conversation to diagram the timeline or parse the exact phonetics of how 7:15 was articulated. They used a simple, functional, conversational loop to fix the ambiguity instantly. Do you mean before bed? Yes, before bed.
Okay, but
Natural practice at home, at work, and with friends relies entirely on pragmatic tolerance. Native speakers do not expect phonetic perfection from learners. They use situational context to bridge the gap.
even with severe mispronunciations?
Exactly. If a beginner massively mispronounces breakfast as breakfast, the native speaker doesn't just stare at them blankly. They use context. It's 8 o'clock a.m., there's food on the table, and they ask a clarifying question. "Oh, you mean breakfast?"
And give them the correct pronunciation.
Right, and if the beginner has mastered the phrase, "sorry, I mean," they can seamlessly confirm and correct the trajectory of the conversation. That negotiation of meaning in real time is the true engine of language acquisition, not the solitary perfection of phonemes in a soundproof booth.
I agree that the negotiation of meaning is an important survival skill, but I maintain that you cannot negotiate meaning if you do not share a baseline structural reality with your partner. Let's look at the definitions the text explicitly lays out to establish that shared reality.
Let's hear them.
It defines wake up as stop sleeping, but it defines get up as leave the bed. It defines wash as clean with water, and brush as use a brush. It defines prepare as get ready, and stretch as move your body softly.
Very basic definitions.
But they are highly specific, explicit lexical categorizations. The curriculum is deliberately building a precise, structured lexicon. If a learner doesn't have these explicit definitions locked in, along with the structural rules for how to conjugate them, all the clarification phrases in the world won't help them describe their morning accurately.
I disagree.
They need the rule to know that I prepare my clothes at night uses a regular verb in the present simple, indicating a recurring habit distinct from I prepared my clothes last night.
And yet, when the speakers in the text reflect on their own habits, they rely on natural, flowing dialogue, not robotic recitations of those definitions.
They still use the grammar.
But they talk about wanting to stop checking their phone too early or wanting to sleep earlier. Because as the text simply puts it, good sleep helps the morning. The language here is a vehicle for human connection and practical problem solving. It is not an end in itself.
And never said it was an end in itself.
The structural reality you were defending so fiercely only matters when it serves the interaction. The text explicitly tells learners, if you do not hear well, just ask again. That is a strategy for connection.
Yes, a strategy.
It prioritizes the continuation of the human dialogue over the clinical accuracy of the grammatical input. If you prioritize the map over the journey, you end up with learners who can conjugate a verb perfectly on paper, but are too terrified to order a sandwich.
But if you prioritize the journey without giving them the map, you end up with learners who are structurally stranded, relying on the exhausting goodwill of native speakers to decipher their broken sentences.
Well,
My position remains firmly rooted in the necessity of structure for adult learners. As we have seen from the source material, explicit grammar rules, understanding the mechanics of regular versus irregular verbs, memorizing the application of the present simple for routines, and mastering specific non-intuitive phonetics like breakfast and routine provide the crucial architecture.
right.
This explicit architecture is what adult beginners absolutely need to overcome the cognitive load of a new language, to avoid the pitfalls of guessing and fossilization, and to build genuine, lasting confidence in their ability to generate independent thought.
And my position remains that architecture is essentially a museum if no one is living in it.
A museum?
Yes. Natural conversational practice and the functional mastery of lexical chunks and clarification phrases, learning to effortlessly deploy. Can you repeat that? What does that mean? Or
Let me check my notes. Equip beginners with practical resilience.
True.
By lowering the affective filter and normalizing mistakes, this interactive resilience is what is actually required to survive and thrive in the messy, unpredictable daily interactions at home, at work, and with friends.
Well, despite our fundamentally different pedagogical approaches to the mechanics of acquisition, I believe we do find a clear point of convergence in the ultimate premise of the source material.
Definitely.
Whether approached through structural discipline or conversational resilience, the overarching goal of learning English in this specific context is deeply practical. It is to successfully manage daily routines across the morning, afternoon, evening, and bedtime.
Exactly. And beyond just surviving those routines, the text highlights the goal of improving personal habits through the medium of the new language.
Right.
Whether a learner uses the structural precision of the present simple to declare a new habit, or uses an interactive, negotiated dialogue to express that they want to sleep earlier or stop checking their phone too early in the morning, the English language is ultimately serving a real, tangible human need.
Mastering a language as an adult is a massive, incredibly vulnerable undertaking. It requires the learner to explore both its rigid, uncompromising structural physics and its highly practical, often very chaotic, real-world application.
It really does.
There is a vast amount of complexity in the pedagogical mechanics we have discussed today, and certainly much more to explore regarding how adult minds process and perform new linguistic systems.
It is a process that requires both precision from the instructor and immense patience from the learner.
So, we leave you with the image we started with. If you are listening to this and reflecting on your own learning journey, as you step out into that foreign city, you must decide how you will navigate.
Exactly.
Will you rely on the precise, unwavering lines of the map to guide your steps? Or will you trust your walking shoes and your willingness to embrace the messy reality of asking the crowd for directions? Which approach would you prioritize? Thank you for